The glass exploded inward across Elliot Reed's lap, and for one strange second, the only sound was the soft tinkling of it settling onto leather his father had paid for. Then the flashlight swung into his eyes. "Step out of the vehicle, right now." Elliot did not move fast, and he did not move slow. He kept both hands flat on the wheel, fingers spread, the way he had taught 100 younger agents to keep theirs. Glass slid off his sleeve when he finally lifted his palms toward the shattered window. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask the question burning in his chest. What the officer pounding the door could not have known, what no one on that black ribbon of county road knew yet, was that the man he had just decided to break carried a badge older and heavier than his own. He had buried his father 8 days earlier. The car was the only thing the old man had left him. To understand the night, you have to understand the road. And to understand the road, you have to understand Brookhaven County. It sat 90 miles inland, a flat stretch of farm towns stitched together by a single state highway, and a tangle of county routes that the maps barely bothered to name. People passed through it on the way to somewhere else. The diner off Exit 12 made its money on truckers. The motel beside it made its money on the truckers who didn't make it home. And the Brookhaven County Sheriff's substation, a low brick building with one cruiser bay and a flag that had gone the color of weak tea, made its money, quietly, steadily, on the people who passed through. That last part was not written down anywhere, but it was true. Elliot Reed was 41 years old, and for 19 of those years he had worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He had started as a forensic accountant, the kind of agent nobody writes movies about, the kind who reads bank records until 3 in the morning and finds the one wire transfer that unspools an entire criminal enterprise. He was good at it. He was patient in a way that unnerved people, the patience of a man who had learned that the truth almost always surfaces if you simply refuse to look away. By the time the night on the county road found him, he was a supervisory special agent in the public corruption unit, which meant his job, stated plainly, was to investigate people with badges who had forgotten what the badges were for. He carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. 6'1", close-cropped hair going gray at the temples, a charcoal suit that fit because it had been tailored, not because it had been expensive. He spoke softly and listened more than he talked. The agents under him would have walked into a burning building behind him, and a few of them, over the years, more or less had. But none of that was visible from the outside on a dark road at 11 at night. From the outside there was only a black man, alone, in a $180,000 car. The car. That was its own story, and it was the part that mattered most. Elliot's father, Walter Reed, no relation to the hospital, a joke the old man had told for 60 years and never tired of, had grown up picking other people's crops in a county not far from this one. He had spent his working life as a long-haul mechanic, then as the owner of a single garage, then as the owner of 3. He had put Elliot through college and law school by repairing the cars of men who would not have shaken his hand. And in the last decade of his life, after the cancer diagnosis that he kept secret for almost a year, Walter had done one wildly impractical thing. He had bought a used Lamborghini. It was 11 years old when he bought it. Deep green. The interior smelled of the cigars he was no longer supposed to smoke. He drove it twice a month on Sundays, slowly, with the windows down, through the same county where he had once walked behind a mule. "I'm not driving it for them," he'd told Elliot once, nodding at no one in particular. "I'm driving it for the boy I used to be." Walter died in the spring. The will left the garages to Elliot's sister and the green car to Elliot, with a single line written in the old man's shaking hand. "Drive it slow. Let them look." So 8 days after the funeral, unable to sleep, unable to sit in the house that still smelled like his father, Elliot Reed had gotten into the green car and driven out onto the county roads at night, just to hear the engine, just to feel close to a man he could no longer call. He was not speeding. The FBI does not promote people who speed in conspicuous cars through counties they are not assigned to. He was doing 41 and a 55 when the cruiser's lights bloomed red and blue in his mirror. Officer Dale Hutchins had been waiting in the dark by the grain silo for 2 hours, and he was bored, and bored was the most dangerous thing Dale Hutchins could be. He was 34. He had wanted to be a state trooper and had washed out of the academy twice. The Brookhaven substation had taken him because the Brookhaven substation took everyone, and because the sheriff, a heavy-set man named Royce Hutchins, was his uncle. Dale wore his disappointment like a second uniform. He had decided, somewhere along the way, that the people who passed through his county owed him something, deference mostly, and occasionally cash, and he had built an entire private theology around collecting it. He had a system. He worked the night shifts on the county roads, far from the highway cameras, far from the part of town where anyone with a lawyer lived. He pulled over out-of-county plates and luxury cars, and, with a consistency that would later fill a federal spreadsheet, drivers who were not white. He wrote citations that could be made to disappear for the right consideration. He had a body camera, because the department required one, and he had learned exactly which angles it did and did not see. And he had a habit of narrating his stops in a calm, professional voice for the recording, while doing something else entirely with his hands and his words. His uncle protected him. The union protected him. 11 complaints had been filed against Dale Hutchins in 6 years, and 11 complaints had gone into a drawer and stayed there. He had come to believe, the way men do when the system keeps catching them, that there was no bottom, that the floor would always be there, no matter how hard he stamped on it. So when the low green shape came whispering down County Route 9 that night, Dale Hutchins felt something close to joy. He ran the plate, out of county. He saw the silhouette of the driver in his headlights and made the assumption he always made. And by the time he had the cruiser behind the Lamborghini with its lights screaming, he had already decided how the rest of the night was going to go. He had decided wrong about exactly one thing. He had picked, out of every car on every road in the county, the one driven by a federal agent whose entire profession was the cataloging of men like Dale Hutchins. Elliot pulled over smoothly onto the gravel shoulder and put the car in park. He turned on the dome light. He placed both hands on the top of the wheel at 10 and 2, where they could be seen from any approach. He had done this before, in his own life, more times than a man in his position should have to. The ritual was muscle memory. It was also, he knew, no guarantee of anything. In the side mirror, he watched the officer take his time getting out, watched the deliberate hitch in the man's walk, the hand resting on the holster, not because of any threat, but as a kind of punctuation. Elliot rolled his window down and waited. License and registration. Hutchins's flashlight was already in his eyes. They're in the glove box and my jacket, Elliot said evenly. I'm going to reach for them slowly. I want to tell you before I move. Whose car is this? Mine. It was my father's. The registration will show the transfer. The flashlight crawled over the interior, over the dashboard, over Elliot's face, lingering in a way that had nothing to do with looking for anything. Long way from home, aren't you? This kind of car. A pause. You want to tell me how a guy like you ends up in a car like this? There it was. The whole night, distilled into one sentence. Elliot felt the old heat rise in his chest. The heat he had spent 2 decades learning to convert into something colder and more useful. He thought of his father at the wheel of this same car, windows down, going slow, letting them look. "I'm driving it for the boy I used to be." "I'd be glad to show you the registration," Elliot said. His voice did not change. "It's right here." "Did I say reach for anything?" Elliot went still. What happened next happened fast. The way these things do, and Hutchins narrated none of it for the camera. Because Hutchins had angled his body so the camera saw the door and the gravel and a slice of green metal and nothing else. He told Elliot to get out. Elliot asked calmly what the stop was for. Hutchins told him to get out again, louder, and put his hand on the door handle and found it locked. And something in the locked door, in the small refusal of it, in the fact that this man in this car would not simply spill himself out onto the gravel and apologize for existing, flipped a switch in Dale Hutchins that had been waiting all night to flip. He drew his baton. "You think you're somebody," Hutchins said. It was almost a whisper. It did not make the recording. The first blow starred the window. The second one put it through. The glass came apart across Elliot's lap, across the leather, across the faint old smell of his father's cigars. And Elliot Reed sat in the wreck of the only thing his father had left him and did not move, did not shout, did not reach, kept his hands open and visible, while a man he had never met destroyed a piece of the dead. That was the moment. Remember it. Because everything that follows comes from the fact that Elliot Reed, in that moment, did the hardest thing a person can do. He stayed calm, and he started, silently, to remember everything. The county lockup smelled of bleach and old coffee. They had cuffed him, walked him in, sat him on a metal bench, and left him for 40 minutes. Long enough, Hutchins clearly believed, to soften a man up. Through the wire-glass window, Elliot could see them. Hutchins, loose and laughing now, and a second younger officer who laughed when Hutchins laughed and looked away when he didn't. Elliot had not asked for his phone call yet. He had not raised his voice once. He had given his name, Elliot Reed, and nothing else, and he had watched, and he had counted. He had counted the cameras, and the ones that were unplugged. He had counted the citations stacked on the desk, all of them out-of-county plates. He had noticed the way Hutchins's body camera sat charging on a hook by the door, and the way no one had checked it in, and the way the younger officer flinched, just slightly, every time the sheriff's name came up. And he had thought about a file. Because here is the thing that Dale Hutchins did not know, the thing that turned a bad night into the last free night of his life. The Public Corruption Unit had been looking at Brookhaven County for 9 months. It had started, as these things do, with money. A pattern in the seized asset reports. Cash forfeitures from a rural county that didn't match its traffic volume. Citations that vanished from the docket. A substation whose petty cash ledger had a current running through it that didn't reconcile with anything. It had not yet reached Elliot's desk by name. It was 2 analysts and a junior agent, quietly building a map. Elliot knew about it the way a supervisor knows about everything in his unit's pipeline. As a line item, a county name, a folder he had skimmed and set aside. He had not connected the county to the road his father loved. He had not made the connection until he was sitting cuffed on a metal bench in the very substation that folder was about. The universe sometimes has a sense of order to it. Elliot looked through the wire glass at Dale Hutchins laughing at the desk, and he understood, with the calm that had carried him through 19 years and 1 shattered window, that the man had just made the single largest mistake of his life. Not by breaking the law, by breaking it in front of the one person on earth whose entire career was the patient, unhurried, unstoppable documentation of men exactly like him. "Officer," Elliot said quietly, the first thing he had volunteered in an hour. Hutchins ambled over, grinning. He speaks. I'm going to need my jacket, Elliot said. Inside pocket. There's something in it you're going to want to look at before this goes any further. Yeah, and what's that? My credentials. Here is where the night changed. And it did not change with a shout. It changed with a small black leather case. The younger officer fetched the jacket, over Hutchins's objection, but the kid had a bad feeling, and the bad feeling won. He patted it down and felt the rigid rectangle in the inside pocket, and pulled it out and flipped it open, and his face did something that Elliot had seen on a great many faces over the years and never gotten tired of. The credentials of a supervisory special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation are not subtle. There is the photo. There is the seal. There is the badge itself, gold and unmistakable. And there is a line of text that, in a county substation at midnight, lands like a dropped anvil. The young officer read it twice. Then he read it out loud, because his voice had gotten away from him. Or Federal Bureau of Investigation. The room did not go silent the way rooms do in stories. It went busy. A sudden, frantic, low-key scramble. The sound of men realizing the floor they had stamped on their whole lives might have a bottom after all. Hutchins snatched the case. He looked at the photo, looked at Elliot, looked at the photo. The grin was gone. In its place was the particular gray expression of a man recalculating everything at once. Anybody can get a fake. Call it in, Elliot said. He had not moved from the bench. You have my name. Call the field office. Ask for verification of credentials for Supervisory Special Agent Elliot Reed. They'll confirm in under 5 minutes. He paused. And while you're on the phone, you may want to ask them what unit I supervise. What unit? The young officer said. He couldn't help it. Elliot looked at him, not unkindly. Public corruption. It was at that point that Dale Hutchins did the second stupidest thing of the night, which was to lean down close to Elliot's face and lower his voice and say, Out here? Out here, it's my word against yours, agent. You think anybody's gonna... It's not your word against mine, Elliot said. He nodded, very slightly, toward the hook by the door, where the body camera sat charging, its small light glowing. It's your word, Elliot said, against your own camera, the one you angled away from the window so it wouldn't see your hands. But it heard you. It heard everything you said while you thought no one who mattered was listening. He let that sit. I do this for a living, Officer Hutchins. I have spent 19 years listening to men say things they thought no one was recording. The recording is always there. The recording is the easy part. The young officer had already taken 3 steps toward the door. He was not going to touch that camera. He understood, suddenly and completely, that the camera was now evidence, and that he wanted to be a witness in this story and not a defendant. Hutchins understood it too. You could watch it happen in his face. The slow collapse of a man feeling the floor finally give way. The verification call took 4 minutes. The field office confirmed everything, and then the field office did something that made the young officer sit down hard in a chair. It asked to be patched through to the supervising agent on scene. There was no supervising agent on scene other than the man in handcuffs. By 2 a.m., the substation was not Dale Hutchins's anymore. 2 agents had driven out from the field office. The cuffs were off Elliot. He had refused a ride and refused a fuss, and asked only for a cup of coffee and a chair. And he had spent the intervening hours doing the thing he did best, which was nothing dramatic at all. He sat. He observed. He asked the young officer, whose name was Tyler, 26, 2 years on the job and already sick to his stomach about it, a few quiet questions, and Tyler, who had been waiting 2 years for someone to ask, answered them. The citations, the cash, the drawer where the complaints went to die. The sheriff, who was also the uncle. The angles the cameras did and didn't see. Elliot did not interrogate him. He just listened, the way he'd listened his whole life, and let a frightened young man unburden himself of everything he'd been afraid to say. By the time the sun came up over the grain silo, the 9-month investigation that had been 2 analysts and a junior agent had acquired a body camera, a cooperating witness, and a supervisory special agent who had personally been on the receiving end of the conduct in question. It is hard to overstate how badly that combination goes for the man on the wrong end of it. The downfall of Dale Hutchins did not happen all at once, because real downfalls never do. It happened in stages, each one heavier than the last, and the system that had carried him for 6 years came apart in the exact reverse order it had been built. The first stage was the suspension. Within 72 hours, Dale Hutchins was on unpaid administrative leave, his badge and weapon surrendered, because the destruction of property and unlawful detention of a federal agent is not the kind of thing even a sheriff uncle can shove in a drawer. Royce Hutchins tried. He made calls. He invoked the union. He discovered, for the first time in his long, comfortable career, that there are rooms where the name Hutchins does not open the door, and that a federal investigation is one of them. The second stage was the immunity. Dale Hutchins's entire defense, the floor he had stamped on his whole life, rested on the assumption that an officer is shielded from personal consequence for things done in the course of duty. But the body camera audio, his own voice, "You think you're somebody," the baton, the absence of any lawful reason for the stop, made it impossible to call any of it the course of duty. When the qualified immunity shield was stripped away in a preliminary ruling months later, Dale Hutchins stopped being a man with a job problem and became a man with a personal liability problem. The difference is roughly the difference between rain and drowning. The third stage was the spreadsheet. Because once federal investigators have a cooperating witness and a warrant, they do not stop at one bad stop on one dark road. They pull 6 years of citations. They reconcile the petty cash ledger. They map the forfeitures against the traffic data, and the map shows, in cold columns, what the people passing through Brookhaven County had always felt and never been able to prove. A small, steady, profitable machine for taking money from people chosen by the color of their skin and the plates on their cars. The machine had names attached to it. One of the names was the sheriff's. The fourth stage was the indictment. Dale Hutchins was charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, and he was not charged alone. His uncle was charged with conspiracy. 2 other deputies took plea deals. The substation off Exit 12, the low brick building with the tea-colored flag, was placed under a federal consent decree. Its every traffic stop now reviewed by people who could not be made to look away. Tyler, the young officer, kept his job. He testified. He is, by every account, a different kind of officer now. The kind who keeps his camera pointed at the truth. And the green car, the 11-year-old Lamborghini with the shattered window and the faint smell of cigars, became, in the end, a piece of evidence with a photograph in a federal file. The broken glass documented from 6 angles, a small green monument to the night. A bored man with a baton picked, out of all the cars on all the roads, exactly the wrong one. There is a temptation, in stories like this, to end at the downfall, to let the satisfaction of the fall be the whole of it. But Elliot Reed did not measure the night by what happened to Dale Hutchins. He measured it by what he did with what came after. And that is the part of the story that his father would have recognized. The civil settlement took 14 months. These things always take longer than anyone wants. The law moves at the speed of paperwork, not the speed of grief. When it was finally done, the county and its insurers paid Elliot a sum that would have changed most men's lives. Elliot did not keep it. He had the green car repaired, not restored to sale condition, just made whole. The window replaced, the leather cleaned, the cigar smell, he swears, somehow still faintly there. And then he took the settlement money, every dollar of it, and he started a fund. He called it the Walter Reed Fund. And yes, he kept the old joke alive. And yes, people still ask about the hospital. And he still smiles. The fund pays for two things. It pays for the legal defense of people stopped on roads like County Route 9 who cannot afford a lawyer. The people who pass through counties on the way to somewhere else and find a bored man waiting by a silo. And it pays for the schooling of young people from the county Walter grew up in, the children of the people who once picked other men's crops, with a single condition attached to every scholarship, written in a line that echoes a line in a will. Go slow, make them look. Elliot still drives the green car twice a month, on Sundays, windows down, through the county where his father once walked behind a mule. He drives it slow. He is not driving it for them. He never was. The lesson of the night was not that a badge beats a baton, though it did. It was older and quieter than that. It was that the men who build their lives on the certainty that no one is watching have always, in the end, been wrong about the one thing that matters. Because dignity keeps a record that fear cannot erase. And the truth, if you simply refuse to look away from it, almost always surfaces. Dale Hutchins thought he had found a man with no floor beneath him. He had found, instead, a man who was the floor, and who had spent his whole life making sure it held. If this story stayed with you, take a second to let us know. Leave a like so more people find it. And tell us in the comments what you would have done sitting in that car with the glass in your lap. Subscribe if you want more stories about the moment the powerful learn exactly who they were talking down to. We post new ones every week.